So super excited to be here with you all, and very much appreciate you all taking the time out of your day for what we hope is going to be a very productive and informative session on building developer communities. So the panel that I have up here, you'll get to hear a lot of information that hopefully you can take back to make better decisions as the people listening start to build out their own developer communities. A bit of background on myself. I'm Jacob Peters, going to be facilitating the panel. I'm the co-founder of ComStore and Community Chat. And I guess I like to consider myself somewhat of a half developer in the sense that my background, I'm a data scientist where, half my time, I guess I was a proper data engineer writing code and programming. The other half of my time, I was doing what data scientists do, which is, fighting to make organizations more data driven and being a bit more of a consultant. So now, luckily, I get to wake up every morning and, help developer communities all over the world build better communities through software. I'm excited to be moderating this panel, but instead of me introducing everybody that we have up here today, I figured I'd let them introduce themselves and share the information that they'd like to share. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Megan to introduce herself first.
Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Speir, and I have the pleasure of serving the developer community at Twilio. I have a developer background myself. I write Python mostly, but I decided somewhere along the way that I wanted to also wield those skills to help developer communities be more successful.
Who's next?
Well, I guess you just
want to. Go for it, Amir.
I can go ahead. Okay. So I'm Amir Shevat. I've been in developer platforms for about 20 years, worked in a few startups, sold one, crashed another two, then moved to small companies like Microsoft and Google and Slack, run Slack developer relations, and then was the VP of platform for the APIs of Twitch. And now doing my own startup, helping developers and enterprise build better workflows.
I've never heard of any of those companies, Amir.
Yeah, it's small.
Cool. Well, I'll round us out here. My name is Thengvall. I have been working with developer communities for over 12 years now. I do not have a developer background. I have never been a developer. I like to say I can code a 90s looking website because that's about my level of what I grew up with. I started hacking on websites when I was in junior high and high school because I was really tired of Yahoo telling me what I couldn't use in their plug and play website builder. But that's about the extent of my developer skills. I can build a janky looking website and I can walk myself through a really well documented API. But I have a huge heart for developers. I have a huge heart for developer enablement, developer engagement, and I actually have a journalism background. So I love telling people stories. I love making sure that people are featured, that their work is amplified, and that they have the resources that they need to continue doing awesome work. So I've worked for a variety of companies, O'Reilly Media, Chef Software, SparkPost. I had my own consultancy for a few years, working with a variety of companies, helping to just kind of push the entire DevRel industry forward. I'm passionate about creating resources to do that as well. So I have a book, a newsletter, a podcast, a bunch of things that I now do on the side. And my main job these days is I am the director of developer relations at an open source company called Camunda. And we are a process automation, workflow automation company, actually based out of Berlin, Germany, but I live here in San Francisco.
That's awesome. Thank you all for sharing. So as you can hear, we have an absolute wealth of developer community building experience sitting at the virtual table right now. And I think it would make the most sense for us to kick things off with an initial question around, how you all think about defining, what exactly a community is or what a developer community is, because every company maybe approaches the definition a little bit differently. They come on various different platforms and shapes and sizes. And as an organization progresses, a community can look very, very different as it evolves. So I'm curious how you all start to define that term, existentially as to what exactly community or developer community is.
I can start with just my definition of community. To me, developer relations boils down to community management for a technical community. So in general, I view it as the same type of community building that we do for other communities, whatever topics or ideas are interesting to them, but with a technical spin. And I define a community as a group of people who not only share common principles, but they also develop and share those practices that help individuals in that group of people thrive. And I think that second part is really important, that it's not just a group of people coming together saying similar things or interested in similar things, but that they're actively wanting to help other people not just survive, but thrive and enjoy the work that they're doing.
That's a great point. The way I look at it, there's three aspects that define community. It's fun, belonging, and growth. Fun is like, how much fun am I? Why should I do this? Why is this fun and great? And what are the swag that I'm getting? And what are the awesome people that I'm meeting? Belonging is all about the brand. Is when I ran Google Developer Group, it was like people call themselves GTuggers, Google Technology User Groups. So there was an association with like, I belong to this cohort. And then there's the growth. Growth is ties to what Mary said, like, how can I get what I want to do? And how can other people help me get what I do? Will I get more money? Will I get more love? Will I get more fame? Will I get more anything? How does this tie into my motivation in life? And if you nail those three types down and you're very transparent with them, you'll have a very healthy community.
I like that point about people with shared identities. I think that is kind of the basis of where I approach community from, and giving them space to celebrate and share ideas around that identity with each other is definitely my approach.
Yeah, the thing is, I think there's no right answer. You know, community can come in so many different shapes and forms, and everyone's going to have a slightly nuanced take. But I think everything that you guys said certainly coalesces into things that I've seen and heard before. So it makes a lot of sense. The next thing that I think would be awesome to chat about is to get all of your thoughts on what, you know, the strongest social or economic factors that you believe are kind of creating a why now moment for the community industry or for the developer community industry, and why organizations should be building developer communities. I mean, we're seeing things like a rise in remote work, you know, people feeling isolated because of the pandemic, you know, declines in physical interactions and neighborhoods, organized religions on the decline. People are using mobile phones more than ever. I mean, you know, companies are finding that, you know, community can be a moat building exercise, or they just want to frankly give back to the open source movement. Like, what are some of those big factors in your minds that are contributing to this why now moment for community building?
I think everything you said, that what you answered the question. It was like, that was an amazing pitch, because you answered the question. I think the key here is that our world is changing in front of our eyes, and a lot of the things that we've done in real life is moving online, and a lot of the things that we're going to do in the future are going to be software driven. So developers are the makers of the future, I think. And as a developer, I really enjoy creating software with other developers. So a community brings the value of, it starts with the simple value. If I get stuck, I can go to my community and they'll unstuck me. Things like from Stack Overflow to forums to just going to a Discord and asking a question, all the way to the feeling of belonging, of doing something together with other people, contributing to something, having a meaning, right? A lot of us have lost the meaning from like being at home for so long. And this is the why now for me. Like it gives you a meaning of doing something awesome for other people.
I'll add on to that. I completely agree. It gives that meaning to what we're doing. I think particularly with developer relations, though, we're in a really interesting space technology-wise, right? I think it was last year that the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, said every company is now a software company, which means every company has something geared toward developers, whether it's, you know, an API or a platform as a service, software as a service, something that, you know, they're trying to reach developers in some way usually. And if you go look at, I did a quick Google search for like number of startups founded in 2019. And just in 2019, there's 2,916 startups, according to Crunchbase. And that's just the ones that Crunchbase is aware of that were founded in 2019. So the idea that like, okay, every company is a software company, and there's almost 3,000 new companies that started last year alone that are now sitting there going, okay, how do we reach developers? How do we build communities around this? How do we figure out what developers want, what they need, how to enable them, how to engage them? I think there's a huge reason why there's a boom around communities, but around developer relations communities, or excuse me, developer relations jobs and roles in particular, because companies are struggling to figure out how do we actually engage this seemingly new audience of people, even though they're not new, but it's new to a lot of people who have been in just more business driven, non-tech driven companies in the past.
I'll latch onto that new idea and say that communities are how you build for your future, because it's pretty easy to identify who your current customers are, but how do you make that next generation? And communities are definitely how you build that. And especially in this online world, I do think COVID had a lot to do with how people are approaching it now, of course, but we have opportunities to build communities inclusively from the beginning, and that are not limited to geography or economic status, and that is extremely powerful.
And I want to dig into that a little bit about starting communities at the beginning, especially Mary, as you said, there's thousands of new startups every single year, and all of them are going to be figuring out ways to reach developers by and large. So, you know, Megan, in your background, I know you joined Twilio in the early days when they were just starting out with the community initiative. Amir, you did the same thing with Slack. So how do you go from 0 to 1? Like, how can the companies that are listening today that are just getting started with developer community building, you know, kindle the fire and spark the initial flame? Like, how do you solve the cold start problem where you go from nothing to a passionate group of users and community members?
Megan, you want to go first?
I will say I was lucky that Twilio had been around for 5 or 6 years when I joined, so there was that base. I would say I'm lucky for people who are truly starting from jump, because you have such a big opportunity to build the best possible version of your community. Tech in particular has a pretty bro-y culture, especially in those early days. And so that a lot of that can come with baggage. And there's an opportunity, if you truly are starting from the get-go, to build that in at the start. Not to say it can't be done after the fact, it just becomes harder.
So I had the privilege of starting from the beginning, and I would say it's hard because people think that I will create a community, I will create an API, everybody's gonna come, love my API, and create an amazing community over my API. And that usually is false. Usually you create an API, you launch it into the public, nobody cares, people move on. That's the most common use case. And then you have to ask yourself two things. One of them is, how much value am I bringing? And do I really need a community? Maybe I need to engage a community that is third party. So at Slack, we didn't have a community. We didn't have a community person for the first 3 years of developer relations. We had amazing people writing the API and code writers and partner engineer working with our top partners. But we didn't have a person who's fostering a community. We actually went to the AWS community, to the Salesforce community. We hacked our way into multiple other communities, and we started with 50 developers. After 2 years, we ended up with 250,000 weekly active developers using the API. So once people use your product, like Twilio and other amazing products like that, a community is created by the virtue of the value that your product is doing. So that's, for me, my biggest tip to startups who are trying to focus on communities. Don't focus on community, focus on a great product that will bring the community into your fold.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It was an interesting conversation that I had several times when I was consulting for a couple of years with companies that were, 4 or 5 people, and they're going, well, we know we're too early to hire someone for developer relations. We know we're too early for, focusing on this. And my biggest question was always, why are you too early? Like, we're talking developer relations. In my mind, the framework that I use for it is it's threefold. It's awareness, it's enablement, it's engagement. And like, you might not be hitting all 3 of those pieces right now with a 3-4 member team. You can absolutely be doing the enablement part of it, You can be figuring out, what does our documentation need to look like? What kind of feedback are we already getting from the community? How do we solicit that feedback from people who don't even know about us yet? So there's so much that I think you can do to help build that valuable product from day one. And that could be done by a product manager or the head of product. That could be done by some of the engineers. So I think there's some shared work there. But I think the companies that are, especially these days, approaching community as an integral part of the foundation of their company are the ones that are going to wind up being successful. And I think, Megan, you were referring back to that, some of it, or I'm referring back to what you were saying, rather, in the companies who have a stake in their community and who are really invested in listening to their community and taking that feedback to heart are the companies of the future, because they're showing people we actively care about what you say, and we're not only listening, but we're doing what we can to implement that feedback along the way as we grow.
I think that's a fantastic point, Mary. And to what you said, really listening to the feedback and listening to the members, that's certainly a way to differentiate yourself as an organization building community. Because as more and more companies start to do this, assuming they don't discover that it makes more sense for them to sponsor existing communities, as Amir said they did with Slack, the bar is going to get higher for new members wanting to join these things. Because at the end of the day, we're faced with the human limit in the sense of our time, right? There's only so much time that a single person or a single developer can dedicate to a bunch of different organizations in their communities, as well as balance community with the other ways in which they're consuming information, both in their personal lives and their time for leisure. So in addition to listening to users, what other ways have you all employed at your companies, or have you seen employed very well in order to stand out and differentiate as when you're creating a developer community experience?
I like to think of this as thinking of the whole developer, right? Developers are people too. And I think a lot of organizations have the this notion of developers as these like godlike individuals who,
What do you mean? We are godlike individuals.
Ninjas, all those powerful words. But at the end of the day, I think we can appeal to their humanity as well. And we've done some fun projects with this kind of stuff at Twilio, where a couple of years ago, we did something called a dev box. And it was really just a thank you to general folks in the community for being around, hanging out with us. And it also coincided with a launch of our Twilio Quest gaming learning platform for our products. So the theme of the box was around that. But a lot of the stuff in it was like a coloring book for people's kids and socks, some of the usual swag. But I think you can use those opportunities to get to creative and appeal to things that people care about outside of work.
I think face masks are going to be the next swag, like branded face mask. I'm kidding. So I think one of the key values to differentiate yourself in an amazing community is being a part of a community. So not managing a community should be from within and not from without. So when a developer tells me, hey, this API endpoint kind of sucks, you can say, no, this is as designed, and this is the RTF, read our fantastic manual. Or you can say, yes, it kind of sucks, but we're working on it together. So bringing people into the fold and making it an empathetic, inclusive community is super important. Giving people the opportunity to be successful is also super important. A lot of communities, they say, yes, this is what we want you to do, but they don't focus on the why. What is it in for me as a developer to be a member of this community? And if you create a strong why in Android, the big why was, hey, we're going to give you this amazing audience. At Slack, it was, we're going to make your work life simpler. I'm sure at Twilio is that you don't want to work with the horrible old APIs of sending messages and doing stuff like that. Here's an amazing new API to do that. So focusing on the value, again, and being a member of the community, I really don't like the word evangelist, because evangelist is like, praise the Lord, here's our API. And advocate is like, hey, this is our API, please, to Mary's point, like, please tell us what's broken and we'll try to fix it together. So I'm a strong believer of being a member of the community.
I would add on to that last part, the being a member of a community. And Amir, you talked about this a little bit previously, but the idea of going out to find your community. I think so many people have this idea of, well, if we don't have customers, we don't have a community. And it's like, no, your community right now is the people who need your solution. They just don't know your solution exists yet. And so making a conscious effort to go find those people, doing what you were talking about, right? Going to the AWS groups, going to the various developer groups that already exist and listening, and then saying, hey, I think we might have a solution for you. Can you give us some feedback? Because it's still in the works. We're still building it. We're still figuring out what the best solutions are, whatever it is, but kind of walking through like, where can we find the people who we think are going to be our eventual product community, and go actively look for them rather than expecting them to come to you.
100%. There's also like the uneven distributions of people who are leading the community with you versus the spectators. And if you find those people who are passionate about your product enough to join your mission of like leading the community together with you, that is an amazing magic. Like, you're getting paid to run the community. They're not getting paid. They're passionate about the product enough to help you run the community. In our Google developer leads, we're more excited about Google than I was, and I was working at Google at the time.
Megan, I see your face lighting up. Do you want to share any anecdotes about the program you've built with Twilio Champions to do exactly that?
Sure. Yeah. But it is exactly that. And I just resonate a lot with what Amir is saying around the folks who are just so passionate about the tools that you have built, because these things literally in some cases change their lives. It helps them get a new job. It helps them, land a deal for whatever they're doing, or get a promotion inside of their organization. I think those are the kinds of things that I love to see with what we have now at Twilio. We call Twilio Champions.
That's great. So I know we've talked a lot about why for the community member and what's in it for them. So on the flip side of the equation, I want to get your guys' sense on how you think about establishing a North Star for developer relations or a developer community building program, and what's ultimately in it for a business. Because at the end of the day, it's not a charity case. You do have to figure out a way to make it, an initiative like this worthwhile. And understandably, it's very much in art and a science, balancing these kind of two seemingly dichotomous objectives, right? Like contributing, giving back to people and giving them a platform and elevating them, but also making sure that it's contributing to the bottom line of the business. So how do you all think about measuring the success of these community initiatives?
I'll hop in here. This is one of my favorite topics. I have a whole book on it called The Business Value of Developer Relations, selfless plug. But to me, it boils down to making sure that the goals that you have for the community are also lining up with the goals for the company. And so making sure that, cool, if the company's goal is we need more customers, your team can give back by increasing awareness or reducing churn by creating great content that helps people understand how to better use your platform. There's all sorts of things that you can do that, doesn't necessarily mean that DevRel or community attributes directly to the bottom line of the sales numbers, but still gives significant value back to the company. There's so many times when we struggle with what to track and how to produce metrics that prove that value. But I think anytime we can directly attribute our goals back to the overarching company goals. So here's the awareness that we're generating. There's a higher percentage of people who now recognize who we are at conferences. We had more significant conversations this year than we did last year, or this month than we did last month. Here's additional community members that are signing up as a direct result of the links that we're sending out at conferences, things like that, in addition to connections that you can make externally from the community into your coworkers at the company. And I can share a link later somehow that we can send out to folks if they're interested, or you can go on my website and look for it. But I have a whole blog post about this idea of DevRel qualified leads, and it applies to communities as well. But it's taking that idea of marketing qualified leads and expanding the understanding of leads to be anyone who brings value back to the company. So it might be a community member that you meet who knows your tech stack top to bottom and loves your product and is a perfect person to pass off to recruiting for the next engineering hire, or someone who's giving a ton of great feedback. And instead of you continuing to be the middle person and the translator between them and product, just introducing them to product and saying, look, go have these conversations. This is incredibly valuable. People who might be good for writing case studies or use cases or interviews with marketing. So there's all sorts of connections that you can make, and then keeping track of those connections for two reasons. One, because it's a thing that we do on a regular basis and a metric you can actually point to and say that you're valuable. But also then all of the other departments throughout the company, anytime someone says, hey, what's the value that this team does? You bet that all of those other departments are going to go, no, don't get rid of them. We have to keep them because they're part of our recruiting pipeline. They're part of our content pipeline. They're part of our product feedback pipeline. They contribute to sales because they're escalating people who are interested in buying the enterprise product. So other people within the company are now more aware of your value as well.
Yes, oh, sorry, Megan, do you want to say something?
I was just going to say, I align with broader org metrics was where I was going to start, but it is so powerful to be able to back all of that up with the qualitative stories when you come to the table across different parts of the organization. So that's all. Have the story to back it up from the relationship.
I think this is one of the most painful thing in at least community building for developer relations. A lot of developer relations is considered only community activities, and community activities are sometimes only considered like a fluff, nice things that we do, like donating to charity, right? And a lot of the reasons is that community people don't sometimes they forget how to tie it back to the OKRs and KPIs of the company. I remember there was a developer relations at Google that measured developers touched. I really don't like that metric. First of all, touch developers at your own spare time. Like, don't touch developers, please. The second thing is, why? What is the value? You can touch a lot of developers and don't create any value to the company, right? At Slack, we have a very strong metric that really helped me show the value, which is how much of the software that our developers are building are being used by our paying customers. So it was tokens who are actively used by paying customers built by our developers. And that you can actually tie the value from a developer relations work with a developer. That developer created value. That value was actually now being used by somebody who's paying the company. And that's how you tie the entire loop of the value, and then everybody's really aligned, and you don't need to explain the reason behind it. They'll just give you more money. There's no need to explain why your organization needs to exist.
Those are all fantastic answers. So I know we're running just shy on time here. So if you guys have another minute or two to stick around, there's a few questions I think in the chat. Otherwise, you're welcome to hop off. Great. Let's see if I can pull up the chat here. So a question from John Saddington. He said that he's a developer himself, and he's wondering what community practices that you've seen that work really well for developers that can translate into non-developer communities.
At least for me, like the fun, belonging, and growth is always a good thing. And at Twitch, we used to say that streamers are looking for money, love, and fame, which is basically the same thing, only applicable for streamers. So moving your mindset from what's good to me as a community manager to what's good for my community, and using empathy, and it's super important. The last thing I have to say about this point is make your community diverse from the get-go. It's extremely hard to get a non-diverse community to become diverse, and it's extremely easy to keep and maintain and grow a diverse community. So cheat in the beginning and create a small diverse core, and then you can grow a diverse community.
All of that.
Yeah, +1.
That's great. Does anyone else have any other burning questions for the panel?
see someone ask how to land an entry-level job. I don't know if we have time to tackle that, but I'd love to just say, I think part of it for me has, in the mentorship that I've done for folks, is try out some of the things that you see DevRel professionals doing to make sure that it's a job that you enjoy. Because I think so often we have, engineers who also enjoy speaking at conferences, or engineers who also enjoy writing content, who go, oh, cool, I should be a developer relations professional. And then they switch over and go, okay, it's a lot of context switching, and I'm not getting as much time coding as I would like to. And I'm not getting the opportunities to do as much, actually with the product as I'm used to. And so I think there's something of a mindset that, well, if you're an engineer, you have to be an engineer. You can't speak, you can't write. And I'd say absolutely spend the time speaking and writing. Your marketing team will love you. Your developer relations team will love you. But if you truly want to switch over, spend some more time doing those things. Volunteer to work a conference booth. Volunteer to speak at some meetups. Ask your DevRel team or other DevRel professionals that what's the hardest part of the job. Context switching is a big one for a lot of engineers coming into this, at least. But kind of doing some research and figuring out, is this something I actually want to do? Or do I just want to be, not just, but would I prefer to be an engineer who is also writing or also speaking and giving back to the community in different ways?
+1.
That's a great answer. Well, one last quick question. It looks like from Marissa Domino. How do you view a developer portal that sits separately from your community platform? Maybe this is a broader question around how do you think about, maybe utilizing multiple tools for your developer community tool stack?
We were extremely non-successful creating a marketing site for our community initially, because all of our developers went to our API sites. We had we spent a lot of money creating the why landing page for nice colors at Slack, and we got 0.3% traffic. Everybody went to api.slack.com. So and then we brought the value there. So I'm reach developers where they are. That's my point here. So if your developers are going into one place, bring the value there.
I was going to use the exact phrase, reach developers where they are. And this can be evaluating a lot of different platforms, right? If people are asking the most questions on Stack Overflow, figure out how to support that. If people are on Reddit, there are so many these days, that's the trick of it all. But find and support your community where they're at.
I think that's a fantastic way to end it. Meet your community members and your developers where they already are. So thanks to each and every one of you for sharing part of your day to chat with us. I think this has been an incredible discussion, and I can't wait to see what the recording is going to look like. So let's give everybody a virtual round of applause for the panelists. And now we're all going to hop into our final session of the day, which is a one-to-one Icebreaker networking session over on the Icebreaker platform. So Max sent over the link in chat. Speakers, you're welcome to join if you don't have anything better to do, which I'm sure you do. But with that note, I'm gonna end it here. So hope to see you all in Icebreaker, and if you can tune in to day 2 tomorrow, we'd love to have you.
Thank you, Jake.
Thanks again.
So much.